Good evening and welcome into the Pacers Podcast Show. I'm Kyle Newman, your host.
And I'm Rhett Hensley, your co-host.
We have a great lineup for the next hour. We will talk about pre-draft workouts, discuss Lance Stephenson's top 5 favorite Pacers moments, have an interview with Tyler Smith, and address a listener's comment from last week's show. Rhett Hensley, 15th Pacers Podcast Show. How are you doing tonight, buddy? We're on a roll. You're in a good mood. Yes, everyone, we are a little late again tonight. Rhett had to work earlier, so we had to adjust the schedule again. But nonetheless, we're here to talk Pacers basketball, Rhett. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, but yes, you can blame it on me once again.
Hey, I will take my chances whenever I get them to blame something on you.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I bet you would.
Yes, absolutely. Why not? Well, let's get into this first segment here, Rhett. Let's talk about pre-draft workouts for the Pacers because they've hosted 4 sessions. Let's talk about the first one. It's been intriguing. There's a lot of young players out there who may end up being a key player that the Pacers may sign after the draft and free agency begins. Again, the draft is June 25th, and free agency begins July 1st. So at that time, that is when Indiana would be able to sign maybe one of these players that's working out for them, and for a decent price, Rhett.
Oh, yeah.
And that's always key as well, to get somebody nice and cheap. But let's look at the first draft workout that they held. And this was a couple weeks ago, but they held their first workout with Odom from Indiana State and McAdoo from North Carolina. They highlighted the Pacers' first pre-draft workout. 6 players, though, in total. We'll list them off here. Guards, Keith Appling, Michigan State. Andre Dawkins from Duke. Jake Odom, Indiana State. Scotty Wilbekin, Florida. And then forwards, James Michael McAdoo, North Carolina. And Ronald Roberts, St. Joseph's. So, Rhett, this first workout, there's some good young players here. I've seen all of these players play in college at least once. Who stood out to you in this first draft workout?
Well, I like James Michael McAdoo from North Carolina.
A lot of people do. Intriguing.
Yes, he's one that stands out to me. I think he's very versatile. He's a forward, so that is an area that the Pacers are looking to build on, and I think that he could be a good addition to the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, I agree. He has good size. He has some good post moves, and he really shined at North Carolina for them. And there was a lot of talk. It wasn't any surprise that he was going to be looking to get a shot at the NBA. But I think that he has good potential. Now, for a lot of Pacers fans, and certainly for Bird and the Pacers organization, Indiana State's Jake Odom really stood out, and that's because he is a local guy from Indiana State, the Sycamores. And so there was a lot of interest there. And I watched him actually. He kind of reminds me of you, Rhett, because he's a skinny guy. But he's versatile. He has length. He can really shoot the ball. He can play some good defense. He averaged 13 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists per game as a senior for the Sycamores. And he's 6'4". And the thing is, in Terre Haute, he's loved. And so you kind of have that hometown feel, and you wonder, and he had a good workout, so you wonder if Bird might look to a guy like that and try and pull something off. But the first workout, Rhett, obviously, you're going to have players that are extremely nervous. They're going to first time to impress the NBA organization, the Indiana Pacers. But I just wonder, if the Pacers, I want to ask this to you, if the Pacers were to sign one of these players, do you think they would look at the guard situation, because there's a lot of guards that have tried out, or do you think they will go to maybe more of the needs that the Pacers have right now and possibly a big man?
Well, in this, from what I see right here, and what I think that they need to do is draft somebody that the best available pick there, because even if the Indiana Pacers don't need them, that person could still be marketable. So I think it's best to get the best that you can get out of that pick, and then you can, if you need to, you can move that pick or even add them into your lineup. So,
right, and it will be interesting. We mentioned McAdoo, a bigger guy. That kind of seems like the right player, maybe. When you look at this first set of pre-draft workouts, that's kind of who stands out to me the most.
And he's projected to go late middle in the second round.
Yeah,
so.
and that would be very interesting. Maybe he would be a guy that the Pacers would pick up, because right there at that 41st pick, Indiana has that second round pick there. Maybe they would be looking for that. It would be interesting to see. But the thing I love about these pre-draft workouts, it gives guys that won't get drafted a chance. It gives them a shot at their dream, and they can really try and impress the coaches and team management and maybe make their way onto a roster, much like minors in baseball, minor leagues, and trying to work your way up to the majors. That's kind of, I get that feel with these pre-draft workouts, these college guys trying to get to the NBA. And we'll talk about this in just a little, but there's plenty of undrafted players who really pan out. There's some big names. So you never know if this is certainly important times in the offseason here for Indiana with these pre-draft workouts. But let's get to the second round of pre-draft workouts that they had. And this was just about 10 days ago, so a week and a half ago. And there were, again, 6 players. First, local guy, and the guy who really stands out to me in this one, Pat Connaughton from Notre Dame, 6'5" guard forward, 215 pounds, extremely versatile. You might have saw a lot of people probably, he got on people's radar in the NCAA tournament this past year, and they made the run. Great player, and I think a guy who would really turn out well in the NBA, so stood out to me. But the other ones that worked out, Jonathan Holmes, a forward from Texas, 6'9", 242. Then you had a guy from William and Mary, Marcus Thornton, a guard, a little tiny guard, 6'3", 177. You had Jabril Trawick, a guard from Georgetown, 6'5", 220. Nice size at that guard position. Also a solid player. Then you had Greg Whittington, a forward from Georgetown, 6'8", 205. Another great size player there, the kind of a forward big man that the Pacers may look to get. And then DeLon Wright, a guard from Utah, 6'5", 181. So you in the second set of workouts the Pacers had, you had players, again, a little mix of guards and forwards. I already told you, Pat Connaughton, the local guy from Notre Dame, stood out to me because of how versatile he is. He can really shoot the ball.
Oh, yeah.
He can really rebound the ball. He averaged 7.4 rebounds per game this past year. Averaged about 13 points per game and 42% from downtown in the NCAA tournament for the Irish. This guy is the guy who, coming out, and I'll mention this in a second, out of all of the draft workouts, this is the guy who really stood out to me, and he adds good size. He could be that guard forward. What'd you think about this second pre-draft workout?
Well, DeLon Wright, he's projected to go late first round pick, but apparently the Indiana Pacers are going to definitely keep an eye on him as a potential second round draft pick if he slips back in the draft, because adding Wright, he has size and scoring ability, and he'd be a great addition to the Pacers as they need a future point guard. So I think that he is one of that sticks out to the Indiana Pacers the most. But yeah, that one would stick out to me most. But I do agree with you. The guy from Notre Dame, Pat.
Pat
I'm gonna butcher it. Thank goodness you said it. I can't say his name.
Yeah, I got
Pat
you, buddy.
Connaughton.
I got you.
But yeah, he would be my second pick there. He's a great player. Notre Dame had a great push in the NCAA tournament, but I had them going over Kentucky, and they let me down. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's what I have right now. DeLon Wright. I think that he was a good one that stood out for the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, and the thing I like about DeLon Wright is his size at the guard position, 6'5", 181. Now
Nice size.
It's a nice size guard, really is, and the thing is you could see why he stood out for the Pacers, because he is great with handling the ball as well. 5 assists per game, almost 15 points per game, and 5 rebounds per game. Talk about versatile, and the Pacers need a true point guard. We've been down this road.
And Kyle, and I think that adding DeLon Wright, he, as you said, 6'5", the Pacers are looking to go smaller, but adding a bigger point guard to the lineup would help out. So that's where I like that pick right there. If he slipped back to the second round, I think that the Indiana Pacers should snatch him up.
I don't disagree with that at all, and it will be interesting to see. I do think that along with the draft and the off-season moves with free agents, I think the Pacers are looking for that new identity. I think it will play a factor into if they decide to sign one of these guys, because depending on what happens with Roy Hibbert, if you have that big man there, it will be interesting to see. I don't see Indiana going after a big-name free agent. They probably wouldn't have the money to. And so then you look, okay, maybe they do need that true point guard out of the draft or out of these workouts to sign a contract with. So it would be interesting to see what they do there. But absolutely, I would say Connaughton to me stands out here. But yes, Utah's guard, another great one. So, absolutely right. DeLon Wright and Pat Connaughton, 2 players that we kept our eyes on in the second pre-draft workout. Then just about 5 days later, May 28th, the Pacers held their third pre-draft workout, 6 more guys, to try and impress the Indiana organization. And these players were Andrew Harrison from Kentucky, Taron Petaway from Nebraska, Terry Rozier from Louisville, J.P. Takoto from North Carolina, Rashad Vaughn from UNLV, and Des Wells from Maryland. Absolute guard-loaded third pre-draft workout, Rhett. I'll tell you the guy who stood out to me, and that's Des Wells, because I watched him a lot in the Big Ten this past year. An absolute beast of a guard who really is a two-way player, man. He can shoot lights out, but he can attack the rim. Man, can he attack the rim. And so I really like, and he's a bulky guy. He's not very tall, but a decent guard size. But he's strong. And out of the 6 players here, I watched a lot of Terry Rozier because I'm a Louisville fan. I don't see him really panning out. He's kind of small. He just reminds me of one of those players who was good in college, but again, he wasn't great. And I don't see him. I certainly don't see the Pacers signing someone like him. But for him to make a team at all would surprise me a little bit. But out of these players, Rhett, I really like Des Wells. What do you think? Well,
Andrew Harrison from Kentucky, I thought, he's pretty decent. He's played 2 seasons for Kentucky, but he's improved a little bit over the past 2 seasons, and he came into the pre-draft workout wanting to show that he's more than just a twin. And, I think that he did do that, and the Pacers have commented saying that he would be one that they're going to keep an eye on. So
yeah, I think out of these 6 guys, there was a lot of talk about him in this third pre-draft workout. But the thing about Andrew Harrison, I saw a lot of him at Kentucky too, unfortunately, and he
doesn't shoot the ball well.
He's not a great player. He does not stand out to me. He is inconsistent. He can have games where he's hitting the big shots from outside, and he has an attitude problem. You look over on the bench constantly, you'll see Andrew Harrison with his head on his hands, and he'll have a frown on his face. If Calipari takes him out, he's all upset about it. And I see him being a team chemistry issue guy. I see him being a selfish player because that's kind of how he was at Kentucky. And I just don't think he would fit the Indiana Pacers well.
But I think that's where we would come into Lance. Lance was not a player that when he got taken out, he was frustrated. I think that when he gets taken out with when we're talking about Andrew Harrison, that's frustration because he doesn't want to be taken out because he loves the game and wants to play. So, I think that there's a little bit more than that to that, but
Yeah, I just don't see Andrew Harrison on Lance Stephenson's level. I think Lance was more consistent. I think he was better, clearly. Struggling a bit now, but regardless, when he was on the Pacers, I still think that he even now is better than Andrew Harrison will turn out. I just have that feeling, and I really like the edge. I don't see Andrew Harrison having that edge that Lance Stephenson has either, certainly not the antics, but it will be interesting to see. So, 2 players that did stand out. Yeah, Des Wells, Andrew Harrison to the Pacers in this third pre-draft workout. Let's get to the final pre-draft workout, Rhett. 6 more guys. This was just recently, just a few days ago. The Pacers held their 4th pre-draft workout. 6 players. Anthony Brown from Stanford. Cody Lillane from UMass. Luis Montero from Westchester Community College. John Octius from Purdue. Gabe Olashaney from Iowa. And Kelly Oubre from Kansas.
Oh boy, Kyle. We're hearing a lot about Kelly Oubre.
We're hearing a lot. That's the first thing that stands out to me, and I think that's what really stood out to the Pacers because there's a lot of projections that the Pacers will take Oubre with the 11th pick in the first round. I disagree with it, and you've agreed. But he did stand out in this draft to the Pacers, had some really good workouts, and I just don't see it. I don't think he's the player Indiana needs. I think we agreed that you go a big man in the first round. But out of these 6 players, I'm going to be big on my boy Gabe Olashaney because I'm a big Iowa fan, and I think that he, like Hibbert, is a great defensive player. He adds that length. He blocks shots like crazy. Could have a lot of improvement offensively. I don't know if Indiana will look to go that route. He is a big man, so maybe they would decide something like that. But regardless, I think he would have a shot somewhere. But, then guys like John Octius, a guard from Purdue, stood out as well, another local guy. So what did you think out of all of these guys in the last workout?
You know what? I'm going to have to go with Kelly Oubre.
Kelly Oubre.
No. They have him compared to a James Young as an NBA comparison. He has a 7'2" wingspan. That's pretty decent. That's pretty decent. That's pretty decent.
That's a couple of me.
He's a thin guy, like myself. Well, I wish I weighed 200 pounds, right around there.
Yeah.
But, goodness.
A little thicker than you, Brett.
I know, a little thicker than me. But he's athletic. He's athletic, and really that's what the Pacers need, especially if they're going to go young. But, if the Indiana Pacers did end up taking Kelly Oubre, they could look to trade him or look to get rid of Solomon Hill.
It's true. They would have options.
They would have options because they would be pretty filled up in that small forward position, which Kelly Oubre is. So
yeah.
I think it could be really. I trust the Pacers management on that. I think that whoever they pick is going to be great. And I
sure hope so, because we both agree and know, as many Pacers fans do, this draft is huge. And if that were the case, that Indiana has their eyes on Kelly Oubre, that would mean we're taking him with the 11th pick in the first round. And I just don't know. He's not a player that really jumps out to me that spells the next Reggie Miller. Again, 11th pick. Now I realize those players come around only so often, but that's how important this pick is and how high up in the first round it is. And I just don't see him being that player. I see a guy like a Frank Kaminsky, a big man, who I'm really hot on. And I think that this would be a player, if you're going to draft guard, Pacers, do it with the 41st pick in the second round, not in the first round. Again, I think the big man is the key in the first round, and there's so many other guards, especially that have been working out for the Pacers, that they have their eyes on to see.
Hey,
look in the second round, if anything.
Here's where I see this. If the Indiana Pacers are looking to go small, and this guy's got a ton of potential, put him as a power forward. Bulk him up, or, as they were talking, Paul George moving to the power forward spot, and maybe bringing Kelly Oubre as a small forward in there if the guy is NBA ready. And if that's what the Pacers think that they need to do, then I'll stand by that. But, I think that if this guy's there and the Pacers want him, if the Pacers want this, then I will stand by that.
Well, I love to stand. I'm going to stand by the Pacers too. I hope that they make the right decision, because it's they've let us down the past several drafts. This is a big one, so we're going to stand by them, and if they know what they're doing, we will
stand by you.
Exactly. So, I guess we'll see. But that concluded the pre-draft workouts for the Pacers as they held their fourth, and I don't know if they're. Do you know, Red, if there's going to be any more pre-draft workouts?
There is going to be another pre-draft workout, and I believe that's in a couple of days.
Okay, so a fifth pre-draft workout with 6 fresh faces to come for Indiana. Probably a good, solid mix of more guards and forwards. So we'll see going forward with that. But before we get to this next segment, it is worth mentioning, Rhett, some players. Pre-draft workouts are important, because not only do the Pacers have 2 draft picks, but they could sign potentially one of these players and could end up panning out in the NBA, again, for a cheap contract. So I just want to go down a list of some guys who ended up being pretty decent players and some really great players, but I'll mention a few of them. Bruce Bowen, the champion that he was for the Spurs. How about Ben Wallace, who I couldn't stand as a Piston, but was a good player. Brad Miller, Rajah Bell, Smush Parker. I mentioned that to you, Rhett. Didn't end up really panning out, but he was there when LeBron was on the Cavs in his first stint. He's just a player that I remember. But Udonis Haslem, the champion that he is in Miami, can't stand him. So there are plenty of players that went undrafted and ended up being good players. So it can happen, and it's important. It just goes to show that these workouts, it's very important to see. How about Lou Amundsen, the former Pacer?
Currently playing for the Knicks.
Yeah. The rivals.
Wasn't great, but,
No, but he was decent, and he's hanging around.
He brought some energy.
He did, and he's hanging around there. And this is just since the 2000s, so I'm sure there's plenty of more before that panned out. So you never know. Big draft and coming up for the Pacers, in a big offseason here to potentially sign one of these players from these pre-draft workouts. So I guess we will see with Indiana. All right. Well, before we get to this next segment, we have a special moment for you of an entertaining former Pacer. I think you will enjoy. Take a listen.
Hill will inbound. He goes to the far corner. Here's Stephenson for 3. shot. I guess if there's one guy you want shooting a fadeaway three from the corner, it's Lance Stephenson. Look at this play. The challenge from Wade, he just throws it up there very easily. Could have drawn a foul there as well. But Stephenson, as we've seen throughout the playoffs, is capable of just about anything out here.
Rhett, these moments are what Lance Stephenson was all about in a Pacers uniform. I distinctly remember this buzzer beater in Game 4 against the Heat in the 2013 Eastern Conference Finals. It's vintage Lance, isn't it? A fall-away three as high as it could have touched Bankers Life Fieldhouse at the top. Dwayne Wade fouled him, and of course it wasn't called. And he splashes it and does his little shimmy on the ground. Is it not vintage Lance Stephenson, this
I love
shot?
It. Him and Dwayne Wade and Lance Stephenson, they like to compete against each other. They do not like each other, and it is great to see them play against each other.
It is.
I love it.
Much like it's great to see Lance play against LeBron, as we'll get to in this next segment here. But I love that play. I remember it like it was yesterday. What a shot by Lance Stephenson. That's what he brought to the Indiana Pacers. That's what this segment's all about. It's a little tribute to Lance because we want him back, and he gave fire to the Indiana Pacers, and he really ignited this rivalry with the Heat. And he's a guy who we miss and hope to see back, but we want to give a tribute to him, and we want to talk about his 5 most memorable moments as an Indiana Pacer. And man, that could be a moment in the top 5 because what a shot. It's just classic. And then the fans are going crazy in the gold out. You don't get much better than that. Playoff basketball in Indiana. It's great, Rhett. We've been to many games, and those gold outs, that place got rowdy against the Heat. Rowdy.
I know it's the best time when the Pacers played the Miami Heat. Best games.
Absolutely. It really was. So let's get to a countdown here, Rhett. Our top 5 favorite Lance moments as an Indiana Pacer. I want to get your 5th first. We're going to count. You see, we're going to count backward this time, not in order. We don't want to do that. We want to lead up to it. The
Try
climax.
not to mess this one up this time.
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
Tell me your 5th.
All right, my 5th one. You know, it's something that cracked me up when I saw Lance do this.
He had a lot of moments that would crack you up.
I know. Joining Miami's huddle.
Ah, classic.
I know. That is something that I would do.
I love it. What a great moment that
Eric
was.
Spoelstra's face when he joined the huddle.
Priceless.
Was like, what are you doing? Why? What?
And then
the
for
players,
Lance to keep my favorite part about that, and I'll get to mine, and actually you'll see that mine's kind of tied into another one where I combine the moment. But my favorite part about it is Lance, not only as the players like Norris Cole's looking and Eric Spoelstra's looking at, what are you doing, Lance? But Lance's straight face that he keeps is my favorite part, just like he's part of the team. And even the ref is looking at Lance like, hey, come on, buddy, and going to grab him. Get out of here, what are you doing? And Lance just, as he's staring at him with his eye, looking over in the huddle, what's the call, coach? It's classic.
It's
classic
hilarious.
Lance
I love
Stephenson.
it. And the thing is, they cannot stop that, and that's the great beauty of it.
It is, and that's what Lance was all about. He would bring moments to Indiana like that not only did it fire the players up and gave them a laugh, but that fired the fans up. And you don't think that irritated the opponent? What do you think made it such a rivalry? It's moments like that from Lance Stephenson and some of these other ones that we'll mention that really ignited the rivalry. The crowd got into it so much more because of Lance Stephenson. And that I love. I can agree. What a great 5th. Nothing like your 5th greatest Lance moment being that great moment. A lot of good ones to come is what that means. I'll tell you my 5th. 25 points and 10 rebounds against the New York Knicks in Game 6 of the 2013 Eastern Conference semifinals to close out the rivals. Lance Stephenson was on fire in this series. A double-double, the man had him all the time. What I love about this, is that Lance Stephenson took it upon himself, caught fire, brought Indiana back to close the rivals out in 6. It was an amazing performance. So many shots throughout this game did he have where it was like, did this dude just did this? I mean, he literally would make incredible layups. He would steal the ball. He had a great finish on J.R. Smith that a lot of people watch, and it's like, how did he make that? Got the and one and really ignited the crowd as he pumps his chest and stares at the crowd. Lance Stephenson in this game against the New York Knickerbockers. Wow, what a performance. Moved the Pacers on to the Eastern Conference Finals by himself, essentially, in this game with his performance, saying, you know what, I don't want a Game 7. No, we're going to move on tonight. And he did that, and I absolutely loved it. So that's my number 5, Rhett. What's your number 4?
Well, let's see here. My number 4 would be when Lance Stephenson flops on LeBron and pops his eye up laying on the ground. How funny is that? You can see Land there.
It's not higher. Oh, man, this is going to be good.
He's playing dead on the ground and just pops his eye out.
Oh,
holy
my gosh.
cow.
That's so great. I am surprised that is not higher up, Fred, because it is for me. But I won't spoil where it is. But that is such a great number 4.
I know. It's a great one. I love it.
It really is. It really is. So we'll go to my number 4, and that is the many acrobatic layups and shots that he made. There's so many of them I didn't have a distinct moment. I mentioned one of them against the Knicks in the 2013 Eastern Conference Semifinals, Game 6 there, where he made that incredible layup and got fouled by J.R. Smith. But Lance Stephenson, over his tenure at Indiana, just had so many acrobatic layups and shots that he made. Scoop shots, step backs, lean-ins, fadeaways. I mean, the list goes on and on. Some that just blew your mind, like, did he really just do that? How did he make it? Awesome. Much like Derrick Rose with his scooping layup shots. I mean, Lance Stephenson took some to another level even. And, I mean, we played the clip of it, the fadeaway 3 in the corner that happened to be nothing but net. I mean, Lance Stephenson was made of those moments and shots like that. And really, that's what stood out to me for my number 4. It's just over his tenure, he had so many moments, great acrobatic layup and shots made moments. And to me, that's what was so incredible. But, I mean, there's games against the rivals in the division, the Pistons. There's games against the Bulls where he had just unbelievable layups. The Miami Heat mainly, maybe most of all, did he have incredible acrobatic layups and shots. I mean, seriously, Lance Stephenson, on my list, number 4, greatest moments would be his many acrobatic layups and shots made, Rhett.
Exactly. And, moving on to my 3rd, Lance Stephenson flips over Al Horford and makes the layup, comes crashing down.
Oh, what a great play. I remember that.
Oh, my goodness. I thought he got snapped in half. For sure.
And he pops back up. And
after he lays there in pain.
Yeah. But
I feel like...
But we know Lance Stephenson, Rhett, is a man of drama.
He is.
So was he really hurt, or was he playing it off?
It sure looks like it hurt.
I would think it would hurt. I can only imagine the fall he took. But what a great moment that was. Yeah,
it was. He's one of the best finishers I've seen as a Pacer, and what an incredible move.
It really was. That's another great moment from Lance for Indiana. Well, I'll get to my number 3. And I'm going to say his last year with us, 2 years ago, the 2013-2014 season. He had a franchise record 5 triple-doubles. He averaged 13 points per game, and he led the team in average rebounds at 7. I repeat, he led the team in average rebounds at 7 and made history with 5 triple-doubles and 13 points per game. Rhett, his last year with us was incredible.
Yes, it sure was. I tell you what, that is something that I miss seeing.
I do too.
Those triple doubles, he almost got a triple double in the wrong direction one time.
He did.
But Frank Vogel made sure that was not going to happen.
Exactly, and in the Heat, again, that rivalry really brought out the best in Lance Stephenson. He never backed down from the challenge. That's what I love about the man.
I know.
He doesn't back down from the challenge, and he's a strong guy. He has strong moves. I mean, he would back LeBron down to the basket and bully his way in there just as LeBron would. I mean, he is a fearless guy with great antics. But that season, the thing about a couple of these triple doubles, he made sure he was getting a triple-double. He would steal rebounds from Roy Hibbert and the guys. It would crack me up every time. He would be sure that he would get that rebound.
I know, and that's, I liked that about him. Making sure that he grabbed the offensive or defensive rebound. That is something that he made sure that the Indiana Pacers were going to have that ball.
Exactly.
And we know that Roy Hibbert's not the best rebounder, and that's one of the excuses that he gave for not being able to rebound. And this year has shown that that was not the reason. So,
exactly.
I loved it.
I loved it too. I really did. I loved it. All right, Rhett, give me your number 2.
All right. Let's see if you know this one. Lance Stephenson blows into LeBron's
We're so close in ours, but yes, man. What?
That is one of my favorite moments. I got a funny story.
I think it's every NBA fan's favorite moment. Even if you didn't like the Pacers, it made you laugh.
Yes, it is something that really just makes me laugh, and I had a great moment with that. I was in Miami, Florida, a few days after the game.
Wait, you went to Miami? Again, without me?
I did. I had to go to Miami to board our cruise ship, and I was wearing my Lance Stephenson T-shirt.
Representing down in South Beach.
Yes, I was kind of scared for my life, but we were on the cruise ship, and I was eating breakfast, and there is a lady. I had no clue that the lady was walking up behind me, but sure enough, she was, and she comes up and turns beside me. I had no clue, and she blows in my ear.
What?
And I'm like, what the heck is this lady doing? And she's like, that's for you blowing in my man's ear. And I went, what? She's like,
Cuckoo.
I'm like, holy crap.
That's the real deal. That just goes to show you that
it was
rivalry.
hilarious. It was hilarious.
Did you throw an ice cream cone at her?
No, I actually laughed. It was hilarious.
Oh, okay.
It was a funny moment that I enjoyed. It really cracked me up.
That is great. I love you. I love you representing for Indiana down there in the rivals' hometown.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome, and what a great number 2. We haven't flopped, Rhett. Although my number 2 was back where your number 4 was, buddy. And my number 2 is the dramatic flop in Game 2 of the 2014 Eastern Conference Finals against the Heat. And you can't deny the greatness and the comedy that comes out of this. It just cracks me up when he flops down to the court, rolls over, acts like he's dead. Paul George comes over, and you see Lance Stephenson roll his eye and open it twice. And then finally Paul George tries to help him up, and he's lackadaisical about it, and then he really yanks him up. It's vintage Lance Stephenson. And then Stan Van Gundy's comments on it when they show the replay about Lance being great for drama school here. But he starts laughing, saying, well, look at, he opens his eyes, and he's like, what a great flopper. Lance Stephenson is. I love the commentary that happens there. It even cracked them up. How could it not? He had a sense of humor, Rhett.
I know, it was great.
And that is legitimately my second most memorable Lance Stephenson moment. I will never forget it. I've never seen it, and I don't think we'll ever see it. Lance Stephenson, I love it. Rhett, what's the number one? Dun 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 dun.
All right, you ready?
Drum
This
roll.
This is the funniest one that I have to tell you. It's nothing to do with his gameplay or anything like that.
I think I know what it is.
Sir Lancelot.
Sir Lancelot, where he got that nickname.
I sure loved when he did that. That was hilarious. Sir Lancelot.
It really was hilarious, and did he not pull it off? I mean, my goodness.
Goodness gracious, he pulled it off. And that is hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing when I first saw that.
I couldn't either. It really was. It just absolutely cracked me up, too. And can't disagree with it, Rhett, although yours is switched now with mine. We are just a little out of order here, but in pretty close agreement, I think it would be understandable. My number one, Lance blowing in LeBron's face in Game 5 of the 2014 Eastern Conference Finals. And then this is where I combined it. And when he listened in on the Heat's huddle, because this was in the same game. So you had two great moments in this game. We talked about the listening in on the Heat's huddle, classic. Lance blowing in LeBron's face, Rhett, as we mentioned, it was absolutely hilarious. My favorite part about it is LeBron's reaction about 2 seconds later after he smells his breath. It absolutely cracks me up. Like, tic-tac? Anyone? I mean, he legitly, like, hey, best friend, gives him a blow over there looking at him, and then 2 seconds later, LeBron just smiling and shaking his head. Absolutely cracks me up every time I see it. There are some funny videos on YouTube about saying LeBron and Lance, best friends forever. Check it out because it is hilarious, showing their moments from their few years in the rivalry. But this was the ultimate. This is the number one Lance Stephenson moment as an Indiana Pacer. Absolutely classical. And nobody, I think, would forget it. I think people remember Lance for this moment. So it has to be the greatest Lance Stephenson moment.
I know, he was blowing a kiss.
He might as
well
have
out the
Saturday
candles.
Night Live. Exactly.
I know.
He really was. He was trying to blow to start the fire. He was blowing out the candles. He was doing it all. I mean, it was absolutely hilarious. My number one. We're pretty close on our top five, Rhett. We're going to miss Lance Stephenson. Hopefully we will see him back in an Indiana Pacers uniform. But that was just a little tribute for Lance Stephenson.
I loved it.
All right, Pacers fans, we have a special guest with us today. Tyler Smith, editor at IndySportsLegends.com, has joined us. Rhett, we have our first guest on the show. This is exciting.
Exciting. Great to have him.
How are you doing today, Tyler?
I'm doing well. Always excited to talk Pacer basketball, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. We're happy to talk Pacers basketball always as well. And we're going to get into asking you the first question, and that is, what do you think of Roy Hibbert?
Well, Roy Hibbert is kind of one of those players that's a little bit complex to discuss, if you will. I mean, some fans, think he's the best center in basketball, and then other fans ridicule him constantly and say that, this guy shouldn't even be getting backup minutes. And, I mean, you guys know how it is. It's pretty extreme one way or the other. For me personally, I try to not be so extreme in my opinions about a player or a sports topic. So many fans in the world today are very extreme one way or the other. Here's where I land on Roy. I do think he is an overpaid basketball player. He's making max money to put up pretty mediocre numbers. Just wrote an article about Roy and recently, and I actually said that his offense is sometimes more bipolar than Indiana weather, which is true. And I think at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean he's not valuable to the Pacers. He's been a big reason for their success in recent years before this past season. His defense is always excellent. This past year, actually, the Pacers were 7th in the entire NBA in team defensive efficiency, and that, of course, is without Paul George, who is an elite defender. Coach Vogel should get a lot of credit for that in his defensive system, but Roy Hibbert should also get a lot of credit for that as well, being the anchor in the middle. Bottom line for me, long story short, Bird and Vogel would love to spend $15.5 million on other players. But here's the thing. If Roy opts back in, if Roy Hibbert is back, I don't think it's the end of the world. And if he's back, I do think the Pacers probably need to continue with their style of play, at least for the most part, which is smash mouth basketball, playing good defense, making the game a little dirty, first team to 90 wins. I mean, this is what made them successful. So Hibbert probably needs to start if he is here. It'd be awfully tough to pay a guy $15.5 million to sit the bench, and I don't necessarily buy the comments from Vogel and Bird that said that he would have to earn his time. I think they're just being strategic and trying to get him to opt out of the deal. But if he does opt in, I think they're going to play him, and I think he'll still be pretty good, especially on defense.
Now, I want to ask you, Tyler, defensively, like you mentioned, he has been a big reason Indiana, before the season, is the team that they are. He's helped shape them to that. Offensively, though, he's had a decline, and I wonder, I'm curious, what do you think it will take if he is back to become more of an offensive threat with his game? And that includes the package of rebounding, too, not just scoring. But what do you think it will take?
Well, Roy Hibbert is very much a confidence guy, and I hate to say that still, this late in his career, that he still is pretty touchy-feely with and how he's handled and treated by the media and the fans and even the coaching staff. They got to try to figure out ways to keep his confidence up, even when he's not playing well. But honestly, if he's in there mainly for defense, then I would just say you don't have to necessarily run your offense too much through him. I mean, make it more guard-oriented. I think the Pacers need to do a better job at running. When they get a turnover rebound, they need to push the tempo a little bit and try to score. And really, the G2 zone connection, use those guys, make them the bulk of your offense. You don't have to go to Roy, especially if he's having one of those nights where just nothing's working. I mean, you may try to find him early and see if you can get him in a rhythm. But if his confidence isn't up, if he's in a kind of a funk, I would just say, focus on defense for him and use offense in other ways.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we will see what happens with Mr. Hibbert, and if he will be in the Indiana Pacers uniform or not. It will be interesting. So we're going to move on to the next question here, Tyler, and I'm wanting to know, what do you think of Indiana's season this past year? Successful, not? What'd you think?
Well, overall, I think it was kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I still remember vividly, the night that Paul George went down, and I'm thinking, man, this is tough. I've got a season credential at all these Pacer games, and I'm thinking, man, the player I want to watch and cover the most is not going to be playing, and it was tough, and I just, felt bad for him and obviously Pacer fans and the whole team. But with that said, overall, I did see some good things. I predicted that they would finish between, either 6th or 7th in the East. At the same time, when I made that prediction, I didn't anticipate George Hill missing so much time and so many of the Pacers outside of Paul George to also miss that many games. So that was tough, and they still had a chance to get that high later in the season, which was pretty good for them to be able to do that. I do think, as far as some of the positives, Solomon Hill became a better player, which had to be one of the top goals for this past season. Pacers don't have too many young players to build with, so to me, his development was more important than, say, coming in 8th and getting a playoff spot. But I saw some good things, too, in spurts from Lavoy Allen. Rodney Stuckey proved that he was a fit here. Whether or not he stays, we will see. But another one of the big positives to me was the play of George Hill. And I was actually calling for this a couple years ago, even when the Pacers were, a title contending team. I felt like George Hill became too much of a bystander. He would pass the ball and then he would just kind of stand off to the side. And, Coach Vogel would talk about, his defense and playing well there. But I think this past season proved what kind of offensive player George Hill can be if he is aggressive and if he's kind of given the green light to play how he likes to play. And so for me, I'm hoping that, Coach Vogel can remember this past season, and even with a healthy Paul George, turn George Hill loose, make him the number 2 option or number 3 at worst case scenario in the offense. And, that was a positive as well. So I do like the fight that they showed. I do like the fact that fan interest was still pretty high in this team, considering the circumstances, which was important. And I think Larry Bird even commented on that. It was important to keep them, spirits of the fans high moving into the next year. I'm also glad that they didn't decide to just tank from the word go, because that would have been pretty painful to watch, and we would probably feel a lot different right now going into this season if they just tanked everything away, as opposed to at least some of the positives that we did see.
Absolutely. And if you're just joining us, we have a special guest, Tyler Smith, editor at IndySportsLegends.com, with us, taking some time. Rhett, I know you have a couple questions for Tyler.
Oh, yeah. So I'll go right in. What does Indiana need to do in the offseason?
Well, for me, that really depends on what happens with the core players. I mean, I fully anticipate Roy Hibbert and David West to both opt back in. West is probably going to stay and give it maybe one more year before he retires. Hibbert, though, it just comes down to money, the fact that he'd be turning down so much money if he does opt out.
Right.
So assuming back, then you turn to Rodney Stuckey. And as I've mentioned on Twitter before, I hope that Rodney Stuckey does not become Jarrett Jack 2.0. Many Pacer fans may remember Jarrett Jack played really well for a season for Indiana, but then he kind of priced himself out of a return because he got some pretty big offers. So that's one of the more intriguing things of this offseason is how much money are other teams going to throw at Rodney Stuckey, and how much is Larry Bird going to be comfortable with handing out a contract. I don't think he's going to want to go more than 2 or 3 years with Stuckey. So it comes down to a preference thing. And, I know talking with Rodney, he likes it here. But you know how it is with athletes. If they get a huge offer somewhere, it's tough to turn that down. So to me, if those guys return, and I do think that they will, then I think the Pacers only need tweaking this offseason. Very important draft coming up they need to hit on. But I don't think they need to make some overhaul. I think they need to give it one more shot with the core players, assuming Paul George is back. Keep the core together. You make a few tweaks, maybe get a little more athletic and a couple young guys in there, and I think they can make a run.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You made some great points. But speaking of the draft, who do you think the Pacers need to pick up in the draft?
Well, there's a lot of intriguing names. For me, this is kind of how I've always been. I try to put myself in the shoes of, a general manager or president of operations making a pick. Really in any sport, I would always be very tempted to take the best available player. Oh, yeah. Now, the problem is, with a wide open draft, you're not really sure who that's going to be. But instead of looking at a specific need for a team, my thought process is kind of, this person, a good young player, we hope is going to be here for many, many years. And year to year in the offseason, it seems like there's different holes that you're trying to address. So rather than trying to just, maybe fill one hole for this coming season, I'm looking long term with this pick, especially, picking 11th in the draft. There's going to be a pretty good player there. So I would take best available. I mean, with that said, the Pacers look to be a little more set at the guard if they do, bring these guys back. Finding a replacement for David West, maybe a good backup, and then his eventual replacement is what they want to do. So there are some intriguing names with that. So if it's up to me, I'm probably looking at best available 4, guy who can play 4. But if there is a can't-miss guard who I think would be better long-term fit, I'm still taking the guard.
Right, and
Yeah.
and that makes sense. There are a lot of great players out there. Rhett and I kind of think big man first round, guard second round. It will be interesting to see what happens in this important draft for sure. Finally, Tyler, before we let you go, what's your prediction for the Pacers this next year?
Well, it's always fun to talk about, even though we kind of have to wait and see what they do in the offseason. But if you're asking what I think they will end up doing, taking everything into consideration, I really see that this Pacers team being a contender in the East again next season. And by contender, I'm thinking, somewhere between the 3 and 5 seed range. Again, total estimation here based on what I think might happen in the offseason. Larry Bird, he said that he's always in win now mode. And so I think he's going to be aggressive. I think he's going to try to keep at least most of the core together and give it another shot. Eastern Conference can't be much worse. It's probably going to get a little better, but I don't see it being, way better in a short amount of time. So they get Paul George healthy and turn him loose and, stay healthy for the most part in the season. I think this team is going to be right back in the conversation in the East, 3rd to 5th seed.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of where Rhett and I stood. I predicted 3 seed with Paul George being back and healthy, and then depending on what they do in the draft and in the offseason, Roy Hibbert coming back or not, and do they pick up a big name free agent if Hibbert is gone, like a LaMarcus Aldridge or a Kevin Love, as Rhett keeps saying, but I have to keep reminding him that he's not. He's probably staying in Cleveland, and if he isn't, he probably won't be coming to Indiana, but I guess it can't ever hurt to pretend.
Yeah, it's always fun, especially this time of year. I mean, the possibilities are out there, and obviously, we're looking at the big fella Hibbert and what he's going to do, and then we got a good NBA Finals matchup coming, and then exciting part is, we watch it and we see what happens, and the season will be here before you know it.
Absolutely.
It's going to be great.
And we are looking forward to that season for the Pacers for sure. Hopefully they can get a nice rebound. Well, Tyler, thank you very much for your time. We both appreciate it, and we look forward to reading more of your great writing, and we look forward to hopefully maybe having another interview in the future, but certainly following you and your updates and the Pacers talk.
I appreciate you having me on, guys.
All right. Well, thank you.
Welcome. You have a great day.
You too.
Right.
Go Pacers.
Go Pacers. That was Tyler Smith, editor at IndySportsLegends.com. Rhett, Tyler brought some good points to the table. What are your thoughts on what he had to say?
Well, he had great thoughts. I did like the draft picks that when we got to the topics of draft picks, he said that Indiana needs to go with what's best on the table, and they can use that as a valuable trade option. He brought a very non-biased opinion to the table, and I like that.
And he was well-spoken. He knew what he was talking about.
Yes.
The Indiana Pacers. And I agree with you. He made some great points with that. Let's first start with what he talked about with Roy Hibbert, because that's the first question we had asked him, is what he thought about him. What'd you think about it? I liked how he had said that, he wasn't completely bashing him. He kind of had both sides that fans are kind of on edge about him.
I liked that.
Acknowledge that that Roy Hibbert is a defensive monster for the Pacers, and he is the core, and he is what he was the rim protector that the Indiana Pacers have been built on, and sets the foundation down there. He wasn't as good this past year, but he still is a great defender, and he did get the Pacers to where they are by his defense and made his presence was known. And then he also brought the perspective of him struggling on offense, and you kind of got the sense that he thinks that he will be back and will opt in because of the money, and then Indiana will do a good job of trying to make his role work. If he happens to go, he sounded all right with that too. So what did you think, Rhett?
I really liked what he had to say on that, because the Indiana Pacers are not going to sit somebody that makes $15.5 million.
No.
Putting him down at the end of the bench sitting with Dom John Rudez, that's not going to happen.
No, it's not.
I think that is that's something that is not going to happen, and they're going to play him if he stays. And he could opt out, but like Tyler said, he's not going to turn down $15.5 million. If he does, then he's crazy. But if he wants to look at the other aspect of it, not Lance Stephenson, sorry, but Roy Hibbert, he got booed an awful lot towards the end of the season.
Did.
And, coming back to that could be bad. And they did disband Area 55, so there has been a few signs that I've seen that could end up with Roy Hibbert.
You're still on the Lance train, baby.
I'm still on the Lance train. I am.
Hey, that's okay. Yeah, I agree, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out with it, and I think that Tyler brought some good perspectives in regards to that question. Then we had asked him, what did you think of Indiana's season, and what do they need to do in the offseason? I liked his points that he made as well, Red. Like you said, in the draft, take the best available player. It's important that the Pacers do that because of how big this draft is. So really evaluate and take your time, and I think that's what these pre-draft workouts are helping with, Rhett. They help you get to see some of these players that are on the Pacers board. You get to see players potentially that they can sign that can help this team in the offseason. But it's for Tyler really believe what happens in the offseason a lot has to do with what Roy Hibbert does because of the money involved. But a lot
of money tied up into him.
Yeah, absolutely. But he believes in Bird. He believes in Indiana's organization and them making the right moves and making it work, and we do too. And I'm curious your thoughts on what he had to say about Indiana's season.
Well, he brings a very good perspective to it, and I really liked talking with him on it. So,
agreed.
Roy Hibbert in this offseason, it's really just there's a lot of money tied up into him.
Yep.
And David West. So really you can't really predict the offseason right now based on Roy Hibbert because nobody knows.
No.
He's off doing jiu-jitsu in Los Angeles right now. He's busy.
He is, and you know what? I think he should be busy working on his game.
Well, hey, maybe this can get him good, increase his balance.
Yeah, maybe so.
We know he needs it.
He does need it. He really does. You make a good point there, but I agree. It does have to do a lot with that. And Tyler mentioned David West. He thinks he'll opt in. I hope he does.
I
love
think
the
he
bad man that David West is. I think he has some left in the tank. If he can stay healthy, I want to see David West back in an Indiana Pacers uniform because he is part of this core team that Vogel built and Bird built, and I want to see him back in an Indiana Pacers uniform. So those were some very interesting points he made. And then I liked how he kind of agreed with us on Indiana's season. It was a pretty successful season despite missing the playoffs considering the circumstances. And I liked what he had to say about that. I mean, real optimistic if you're Pacers fans. You have to be with Paul George going down and George Hill and David West being injured, and you bring Stuckey and Miles in. You don't really know what you're going to have, and the Pacers darn near made the playoffs. So I really was impressed with how they finished, and I think Tyler agreed. Yeah,
exactly. The Pacers finished pretty well for having David West and George Hill out for most of the season, especially George Hill. He was out a lot. So, if those two would have been back, they had potential to have a good chance of making the playoffs.
And then you had the encouraging sign of your superstar Paul George being out all year, but then not. He was able to come back for a few games at the end of the year to show, you know what? I've recovered from my injury. Pacers fans, I'm going to give it my all to try and get us in the playoffs. If it doesn't happen, I'll be back next year. I loved it. I mean, that's a successful season considering everything that happened. Just a remarkable recovery in 7 months.
Shows the fight.
for Paul
Shows the fight.
George. It really does. It really does. So I love to hear him say it. And then his prediction for the Pacers next year is finally, the last question we asked him, kind of is on board with what we're believing.
Yeah, and you really can't predict next season right now in June, like he said, but it's still fun.
It is fun.
To take a prediction this early and see how close you got it right next season.
Exactly. And it sounded like we were all around the 3rd to 4th seed for the Pacers if Paul George is back and healthy and they make the right offseason moves here and Roy Hibbert back or not back, regardless. We all believe in Larry Bird and we believe in Fred Vogel, and that's the key. I'll stand by you. That's
exactly.
That's the theme of the night, Rhett, because that's what it really is. So
I know.
Hopefully the Pacers will be back to that form and that prediction will come true. All right.
Exactly.
Rhett, before we finish up this show, we have to address our first comment on one of our podcast shows. Last week's show, Mitch Tiz, thank you for commenting and leaving a nice detailed feedback for us, and we're going to address it here.
And by detailed, we mean book.
Absolutely. We appreciate the paper.
We love it.
We do. We want more of it, please. And we're going to address it here and talk about some of your comments. Rhett, before you get into it, because I am going to let you take the road here, and we're going to kind of discuss it, and I'll respond in some. But I just want to give you some. I want to respond to a couple of Mitch's comments that I did look into and have here. So basically, Mitch, you made some great points, and I'm glad that you listened in on the show and was listening to what we had to say about our certain points and topics. We liked how you kind of broke them down. But I'm going to start with the Ray Allen comment that you made. Okay, so the year you were referring to where you thought he led the league in points, he actually didn't. That was in 2006-2007. He averaged 26 points per game. He was 6th in the league that year. Kobe led the league with 31 points per game. Ray Allen, this is my biggest point that I want to make, and this is what I was making on last week's show, Mitch, about rings. Are rings everything? Do they define a player's NBA career legacy completely? And my answer was no. And here's kind of my summary of that point. Ray Allen won 2 titles. Is he clutch? Yes. Does he have great stats over his career? Yes. Has he passed the great Reggie Miller that we love in all-time three-pointers made? Yes. However, he wasn't the heart and soul of his 2 championship teams, and he wasn't a superstar. I would not call him a superstar. Reggie Miller, on the other hand, was a superstar, and he was the heart and soul of the Pacers. So my point is that Reggie Miller never won a title, and yet is a Hall of Famer, like Ray Allen will be. Meaning that rings aren't the only thing that defines a player's NBA career legacy. There is much more that factors into it, like the team that you're on, character on and off the court, stats, clutch moments, etc. Reggie is just one of the many Hall of Famers who never won a title. We mentioned that on last week's show, and that just goes to show you that there's more than just rings that defines an NBA's career legacy, and that was my biggest point. Mitch and Rhett, I'll let you comment here and kind of take the road and
All
respond.
Right. Well, I would like to start out with Ray Allen. Played 18 seasons, averaged 18.9 points a game, 4.1 rebounds, and 3.4 assists. And throughout his career, he played in 10 All-Star games, 2-time All-NBA team, 2 championships. So very good stats, very good career-wise. Now let me move on to Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller played 18 seasons, 18.2 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 5 All-Star games, and 3 All-NBA team. So those right there, they're very comparable. They're very close together.
Yeah,
so,
1 and 2 on the all-time three-pointers list.
Yes. And obviously, me and Kyler being a little biased, because Reggie Miller is
betcha.
one of our favorite players of all time. So we're going to be biased, but if I'm looking statistically, this is in my own opinion, Ray Allen has the better stats. He has accomplished a lot, but both have accomplished a very good amount of accomplishments. But, Reggie Miller was the heart and soul of the team. Ray Allen, as you'd say, he was just another fish in the pond that, came off the bench and started. He came off the bench for Miami. But Reggie Miller was the heart and soul. Ray Allen was not. He was just another player that played really well. So in that aspect, in my mind, and I can speak for Kyle, Reggie Miller is the best in our heart. So, but statistically wise, in my opinion, Ray Allen has those better statistics. Now, in playoff wise, that's a different story. Reggie Miller averaged 20.4 points a game, and that is career-wise out of his playoffs. And Ray Allen averaged 16.2, I believe. So Reggie Miller, he took the edge in that. And Reggie Miller was a very clutch player too, as Ray Allen was. So, these are two players that, in my opinion, are very well put together and very close together. Can you agree on that, Kyle?
I absolutely can agree on that. It really just hits at my point, and this is what I was making my point to you last week, is that, and I think that Mitch is agreeing with me on this aspect, is by making that comment, is that it's not just rings that defines an NBA player's career legacy. Clearly, as we're sitting here gloating on Reggie Miller, because there's much more that goes into it, as I mentioned. And at the end of the day, that's where, when I look at those two players, in my mind, Reggie Miller, the way that I see it, sure, Ray Allen has those two rings, but I would still take Reggie Miller over Ray Allen. He was more versatile of a player. The clutchness that Reggie Miller had and the way that he led the whole team, I would take any day. And I do have bias, of course, but I would also. But I would, and also it goes to show that a lot of getting rings is a team thing. It's about not just one player most of the time. It's about a whole team. You win the championship as a team, and I know you mentioned that, Mitch, so you agreed with that in that aspect, and it's very true. I mean, you look at Ray Allen's rings, look at the teams he was on when he won, and the help that he had. You look at LeBron and all these superstars, they can't do it on their own. It's a team thing that gets that ultimate ring, and that's why all along my biggest point was that rings alone do not define a player's NBA career legacy.
I agree with you on that, and I think that rings alone do not, surround an average player. Now, if we're in the superstar area, I think that if we're talking about like LeBron, Michael Jordan, comparing those type of people, the big name superstars, that's when I bring out the ring situation. But average players, or a little above average, it has to have that superstar tag.
But see, I would call Reggie Miller a superstar and not an above average player, and Reggie Miller never won rings. So,
I would never put him in LeBron's category.
No, but, I mean, he's on a superstar level, and LeBron's a superstar. So, and clearly you just got done saying that you agree that Reggie is a Hall of Famer, and rings clearly didn't define his legacy.
Yes, and
so that's my point.
It's those big name players that I will compare. So, with rings with. So, as I said, the average player, but, Reggie is an above average, and so is Ray Allen. And, Mitch, we did not want to offend you on your Ray Allen.
No, we don't.
Did not want to do that.
We don't.
But, he's a great player.
He is.
He's a great player.
See, I said, I would not say Ray Allen was a superstar, but I would say Reggie Miller was. And I think it has to do with the load that he carried, along with the clutchness and other things. And that's why I disagree, and I said this on last week's show, with Rhett in some aspect with rings and superstars legacy and stuff, because there's still much more that goes into it, even at that level. And Reggie Miller is my clearest example of it. And that's why I don't like the whole comparison things, even with the Michael Jordan and LeBron comparison and argument there to make, and who was the better player, and they both were superstars. I don't like to do that, and that's a different segment for another show. But that's where I differ on of what defines a player's NBA career legacy. Because quite frankly, I'll say this: LeBron James now is looking for his third ring, halfway to Michael's. Even if LeBron never won an NBA title, he is still a superstar Hall of Fame player.
Yes.
And that is the point that I had. Much like Reggie, like he would have been on the same boat as Reggie. Reggie didn't win. If LeBron hadn't won, he still goes down as a Hall of Famer, great player. And you know what? You could have looked at his circumstance and been like, that's why you have to look into more things. Okay, what team was LeBron on compared to Michael? When you look back into most of LeBron's early career before the Heat, he was on a Cleveland team where there wasn't even an average player.
Yeah,
on
he's
the
carrying
team.
the load.
So could you blame the guy for not winning a ring? That with the competition, that is my perspective from the whole rings and NBA career legacy. And Mitch, we appreciate your input there. Rhett, why don't you address some of the other points that he made there as he talked about some of our other segments?
All right. Oh, boy, Mitch. All right. If the rim height got changed to 11 feet, I agree. The free throw percentage would drop. And in my opinion, it would drop by at least 5%, in my opinion.
Wow. A nice 5%, huh? Like a 5% cash back on a credit card?
I know. I wish I had that.
That's
percentage.
good, but 5% decline in free throws is not good.
Yes, especially for like an Amon Drummond's, DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah.
Yes, DeAndre Jordan. Those people. Maybe they'll benefit because they like throwing it off the back of the backboard. But those players, those great free throw shooters, they're going to have to adjust. Every player is going to have to adjust for that. And, I think it's going to affect the free throw percentage, and it's going to be a very hard transition if that ends up happening.
It really
which
would.
I do not see that end up happening, as I've stated before. And if they did go to, I think 11 feet is a little extreme. I do agree 10.5 feet would be an amount that I would go up. For smaller players, 10 foot, I mean, heck, that's a hike for them. And, that is something that would be taking away from their game, as they've always known the game at 10 foot. And I don't think it'd be a great move.
It wouldn't, and I must clarify, because I was mistaken. On last week's show, the report that I was reading where it was officially going to happen is not true. There is nothing set. There's no known discussions of the rim height changing. It was a false report. Go figure. But that doesn't mean that it won't ever happen. We don't know. For all we know, it has been talked about, but nothing has moved with that to our knowledge of that.
Nothing's
talk.
set in stone yet.
No, so that has to be clarified. But even the possibility of that happening, you have to look at that and is it good or bad? And I think you, Mitch, Rhett, and I clearly agree it's bad. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And
what else?
And on the last one, I'd like to hit on the rule change of the offensive interference rule. I would have to disagree with you, Mitch. I think that rule would be an awful move for the NBA, especially if it's on a 10-foot rim. I do not like the NBA players being able to grab it off the rim. I think it's an awful move. It takes away from a person's shot. You know, you can get that little roll in, and being able to take that off the rim, I don't like that.
Then it gives an advantage to one team and a disadvantage to the other.
Yes, and you know, if I would flop my answers around if as talked about, with Kyle saying that the 11-foot rim, I would set that in place. That is one I would definitely set in place. It would be a great rule. It'd add more of a challenge for both sides, and you know, it'd be a lot harder to grab it off the rim. Don't you agree, Kyle?
I definitely agree. So I would have to disagree with you on that one too, Mitch, and not give an advantage to one team over the other. And I actually, I don't know if I would even agree at the 11-foot level. I think that I like the rule as it is now because it's fair for both teams. You know, if it's interfered with, then it's going to be called goaltending. I like that call right now, so I wouldn't change it even if it was moved to 11 feet. But certainly as it is now, Mitch, I do disagree with that. Rhett?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that is something that it would annoy me. I would not want to see an 11-foot rim. I don't think anybody really would.
No.
But it'd just take away from the game. Adam Silver, you know, he's taken a few great steps into the NBA, and you know, I think that'd be a major step back. So, wouldn't you agree, Kyle?
I absolutely would agree. I absolutely would.
And Mitch, we have a special message for you. We have blue collar
gold swagger, Mitch. Plain and simple. And that means that we live and we die with our Indiana Pacers. We stand by you. We'll stand by you. Making no one hurt you. However else it goes, I can only keep repeating the first one. It is a good song, but I honestly can't remember that second line exactly. But that's plain and simple, Mitch. Is we stick with our Indiana Pacers and we have that bias because it is a Indiana Pacers podcast show. But we do appreciate the commentary and we want more commentary. Tell your friends, listen in.
Tell your brother, tell your mother.
If you have a Twitter, if you want to follow us and we'll follow you, if you retweet the show, we would certainly appreciate it. And again, we want to address more comments. So you were our first, and we enjoyed it. So thank you. Keep it coming. That is all that we have for tonight, though. We did go over again, folks, but you know what? The show may just have to end up increasing to an hour and a half because, you know, we get to talking. And Indiana Pacers basketball really comes out of our mouths, and we can really keep it going. And I'm not sorry for it. Are you, Rhett?
I am not.
It's great. It's always great fun to talk Pacers basketball, but we in all seriousness, we will try and keep it on the hour length going forward. But hey, we're all right with it. So
blue collar gold swagger.
Absolutely, blue collar gold swagger. To recap what was talked about on the show, we talked about pre-draft workouts. We discussed Lance Stephenson's top 5 favorite Pacers moments. We had an interview with Tyler Smith, and we addressed Mitch's comments from last week's show. That is all that we have for tonight. Thank you for tuning into our show. Feel free to leave any comments. Tweet and retweet the show at Kyle M. Newman, at Rhett Hensley, and at Indiana Pacers Talk. We will be back at it next Wednesday by 8 Eastern Time. That's the hope. We'll try and be on track unless, of course, work comes up or something else. But we'll let you know. We'll be back, though, next week for sure. I'm Kyle Newman.
And I'm Rhett Hensley.
Have a good night. Go Pacers.
That's all we have, folks.
Yes, it is. Go Pacers.
Go Pacers.